Hey everyone, for this week's Tip of the Week video, I want to share with you my 5 quick tips for editing wildlife photos. My first tip for editing wildlife photos is to correct your color. Oftentimes when we're shooting in nature, we're dealing with a variety of harsh lighting conditions. That means that sometimes we may come back from our shoot and the color in our photos may be a little bit off. Well, no fear, we can easily correct our color inside ON1 Photo RAW. Like this photo for example, it's a lot cooler than I want it to be, so let's remove some of the color cast and blue tones. My favorite way to do it is to head down into our color options inside our Tone and Color Pane, and I like to use this color dropper tool. To use the color dropper tool, simply drop it on an area that should be gray in your photograph. I'm just going to drop it on this area of gray on our bird here. And notice how it immediately corrected the color in my photo. My second tip for wildlife photos is to level your horizon line. Sometimes when we're editing wildlife, we get too caught up in our subject here that we lose track of our background, and sometimes it can be crooked and off-center. So an easy way to fix that is to grab your crop tool by hitting C on your keyboard. Then you can just head up to your level tool here. You can click and drag it on a horizon line. And now we have a leveled photo. My third tip for editing wildlife is to avoid oversaturating. When we're shooting wildlife, we're going to have a bunch of different elements and objects in our frame. Most of them are going to have a lot of vibrant colors on them. So if we pull up too far on the saturation, for example with this photo, we're going to muddy it up with all of these different colors, and it's going to take away from our subject, the animal. So let's pull back on the saturation to 0, and now we can gradually pull it up until we get to a point that seems natural and look the way it looked when we shot the photo. My fourth tip for editing wildlife photos is to apply detail selectively. This makes sure that all of the detail remains on your subject, and you don't have a bunch of areas on your photo with a bunch of detail distracting your viewer. So rather than applying detail inside of your tone and color using structure, I would recommend heading into Effects, adding a filter, and then masking in dynamic contrast. And now if we only want this applied to our subject, we can head into the filter, and inside our masking options here, I can just select invert so that none of the filter is being applied to my photo. And I'm just going to actually click this surreal preset so that you guys can really see the detail applied. Now with my masking brush selected, I can just paint this detail in on the areas that I want it to be. So now if I turn this off and on, it does a really good job of bringing out all of the little details in our subject. And we can always head down into our opacity, and we can lower it to make it more blended. My fifth tip for editing wildlife photos is to use local adjustments to paint in or remove light from your subject. For this photo, I want to pull out a little bit of this dark area on my bird so that I can see some more of those details. So I'm just going to head into my local adjustments, and with this new local adjustment layer, I'm going to head into my More Styles, and I'm going to choose Reveal Shadows. Now I can just use my masking brush to carefully brush in a little bit more light onto my bird. And now to blend it in, I can just head over to the opacity slider, and I'll pull it down to 0. And then I can just incrementally pull it up until it seems more natural. And if I turn it off and on, it does a good job of bringing in more light and more detail to my bird. You could do the same thing with your subject if you're trying to remove light, just use this darken preset here. So those are my 5 quick tips for editing wildlife photos inside ON1 Photo RAW 2019. I'm Dylan with ON1, and thanks for watching.